Hello, everyone. Today we have this special guest who is Foster Lee. He's a chartered accountant and a tax practitioner. He has over 38 years of experience, so a lot of experience about tax return and important information that will help international students understand more about some tax concepts which are very important for us who are not Australian and don't know really what to do with our tax returns. So we have received some questions already, some comments and questions from students before, and I have passed it on to Foster and he's gonna be addressing them, okay? So Foster, thank you so much for accepting our invitation for this video. And over to you now.
Thanks, Tatiana. That's really great. And thank you for inviting me to share some of my thoughts and concepts of tax with the students. I can remember when I first came to Australia, I had no idea, and I was fumbling along, probably still fumbling along because tax law changes so often. But I think the main concepts of Australian tax law surround certain topics. And I think the first one we have to appreciate is the definition of certain terms that tax law uses in Australia. Okay, and the first one I'd like to cover is what is assessable income. Now, assessable income is income that you have to include in your tax return and pay tax on, okay? And that could mean your salary and your wages, your ABN income, your bank interest. If you've got some bank interest, good luck to you. So all that is called assessable income. So it's income you have to pay tax on in Australia if you are a resident in Australia for tax purposes. Now, I'll come to residency in a minute because that's a really critical issue. The other concept that you really need to understand is what are deductions? Deductions are expenses that are directly related to earning that assessable income that I talked about earlier. Could be a work-related expenses, could be ABN expenses, could be expenses that you incur when you earn interest or dividends. So it's any expense that you incur within the financial year that we're talking about to earn that assessable income, okay? And a couple of important things that need to be understood about claiming those expenses. Number one, they must be incurred. In other words, you must actually, it must cost you to pay that expense during the financial year. Secondly, you must not get reimbursed for those expenses by your employer or by any other entity. You must have paid it by yourself, not someone else paying it for you and then you claim it on your return, right? So those are the three important elements that you've got to bear in mind if you're legitimately claiming an expense. And of course, most importantly, guys, you've got to keep the evidence of the payment. The evidence of the payment could be a tax invoice. Bank statement payments are not conclusive. They are only persuasive. What I mean by that is you just cannot say to the tax office, oh, here's my payment on my bank statement for my work-related expense. It doesn't cut. You've got to have the actual tax receipt. So my advice to you is when you pay for something, get a tax receipt and photocopy it straight away, because those receipts tend to fade away after a period of time. So the easiest way to do it is get all your receipts on an A4 piece of paper, photocopy that A4 piece of paper, and you can throw away the original receipts. That's not an issue. So that's an easy way of doing it instead of photocopying each receipt on each page. So put them all on an A4, photocopy them once, and you can throw away the former receipts. But you've got to have the receipts. You don't have the receipts, you cannot, what they say, substantiate your claim, and it will be disallowed. It will be disallowed. So those are the deductions that you've really got to understand how they affect. So deductions come as the word says, is deducted from your assessable income. So if your assessable income, say for argument's sake, your salary and wages is say 20 grand, your deductions say $1,000 as an employee. So the next definition line is what is your taxable income, which in this particular scenario is $9,000. Your 10,000 assessable income less your deduction of 1,000 gives you $9,000. That is what you pay your tax on. Now, for those of you on wages, that $10,000 would have been subject to tax paid to the tax office by your employer. So when you're paying tax on your taxable income, if your employer has sent more money out, you will get a refund. So if the tax sent to the tax office, say for argument's sake, is $2,000 on your 10,000, and after you worked out your taxable income is 9,000, say your tax is 1,000, but 2,000 is already gone, but your actual tax is 1,000. So voila, you will be able to get $1,000 refund. How cool is that? Okay. On the other hand, if your employer has sent 2,000, and when you calculate your taxable income is 3,000 tax, so the tax office will say, oh, you only sent us 2,000, but we're taxing you on 3,000, so you have to pay another 1,000. Okay, so that's how the structure works in Australian tax, basically, without getting too complicated. So what is the main idea here is nothing in tax law says you cannot minimize your tax. Right? There's nothing that says you cannot minimize your tax. What it does say is that you cannot avoid paying tax on income. That's a very, very important distinction. Tax avoidance is illegal, but tax minimization is legal within the provisions of the Tax Act. Once you step away from the parameters or boundaries of the Tax Act, that's when you get into real trouble. Okay, because a lot of people out there, big companies, they have a lot of schemes, blah, blah, blah. And it's pretty obvious that, in some cases, it's avoidance. Like having a company overseas sometimes, you've read in the paper, but for the students itself, all they've got to really be careful about is do the right thing, keep your receipts, fill in your tax return on time, and if it's done correctly, and 99% of the time, you should get a refund. How much extent of the refund will depend on how many deductions you're claiming and how much are you claiming. Legitimately, how much are you claiming? So in a nutshell, those factors, if you get that in your mind, you'll be able to navigate the Australian tax system. Now, I did mention earlier something about residency. Okay. Residency, Australian tax law is based on residency. That means, do you qualify as a resident of Australia? If you qualify under certain tests as a resident of Australia, And the tests essentially are, do you have a permanent place of living or abode, as they call it, residence in Australia? You got a place where you're staying, or if you've been here for more than 183 days, you know. So all this, not one factor is conclusive. They're all looked at together. You know, have you got employment? Have you got superannuation payments that you make? All these factors determine your residency. Okay. So once you determine as a resident for tax purposes, you have to pay tax on all income that you earn from Australia and from overseas. Okay, I stress that. From Australia and from overseas. If you're a foreign resident, in other words, you don't live in Australia, for example, and you're living in some other country, but you have income from Australia, you're only taxed on income that you earn within Australia if you're a foreign resident. Okay, so it doesn't apply to the students naturally, but for students, they have to focus on the fact that just because they think they're in Australia and they are getting a salary here and they're filling a tax return in Australia, they're deemed to be a resident for tax purposes. Don't forget that if you have income coming from overseas, from any shape or form, you have to make sure that if it's accessible income, you have to put it in. But if you have paid tax overseas on that income already, if you have paid tax, you will get a credit for that tax in your Australian taxation return. So what does that mean? Very simply, it means you don't get taxed twice. We don't get taxed twice. Australia has got a number of DTAs, which is double tax agreements, with a lot of countries in the world. Because of this reason, they don't want to tax people twice. Okay, but you have to include all your income from within Australia and from outside Australia. Okay, so I cannot stress that enough. Now, for deductions for an employee like a student, I highly recommend you go into the tax office website and in the search box, type in QC and a space 31967. Okay, I'll say that again, QC 31967. Now, by going in there, it'll give you a really, really good idea of what type of deductions that you are entitled to claim. It's not conclusive, it's not exhaustive, but the tax office have done a lot of homework for us and for the community by giving us this, what I call a cheat sheet. You know, you just have to look at that and you just follow that, those deductions, what you can legitimately claim. So the tax office have done the research and found that, okay, these are the things that they're going to allow you without any question, but you've got to have substantiation still. Don't forget that. You've got to have evidence that you've claimed. If you're claiming union fees or whatever, you've got to have a tax invoice from the union. If you're claiming any membership fees or you're claiming any telephone expenses, it's the responsibility of a claim, as they say, the onus or responsibility rests with the taxpayer, not with an accountant or not with a lawyer or someone who prepares a tax return. They can assist you and advise you, hey, look, this is a bit too high, you're trying to claim. Can you be a bit more reasonable? Go back into the drawing board and come up with another figure. But whatever it is, you have a duty of care to yourself and no one else to make sure that your claims are reasonable. And the tax office have got a lot of checking stations comparing your employment situation with someone else's employment situation doing the same task within Australia, New South Wales or whatever, and then they'll see, Oh, how come this guy is claiming another $1,000 more than the average person? That's what they call data matching. They're spending millions and millions of dollars on data matching. So don't think you can get away by just claiming willy-nilly whatever you think is going to give you a higher tax refund. You know, this doesn't work that way. As I said to you, you've got to incur it in earning that income, your work income. You've got to pay it by yourself. You've got to have the evidence and must not be reimbursed by your employer. Okay. So a QC 31967 is a really, really important tool for students to look at, most definitely. I'll just hark back to residency. You'll get a really, really good idea of what I'm talking about in residency if you do the same thing. Go into the tax office website, and in the search box, please type in again QC, which is a short for quick code, space 65132. Okay, I'll say that again. It's QC space 65132, and that goes through all the criteria about residency, and it'll give you a really, really good idea of whether you're advising someone else or want to understand yourself, what residency is all about, because that is the crux. It is the crux. So I highly recommend you look at those sites. Yep. Just another thing that you need to look at is for international students is Medicare benefits. You know, Medicare benefits. Often and not, you're not entitled to Medicare benefits. So, but you need to have hospital cover. So, before you fill in your tax return, okay, because you are not entitled to any Medicare benefits or assistance, I urge you to fill in a form that's called an application for Medicare entitlement statement. I'll say that again. It's an application for Medicare entitlement statement. And you can get that from the website, tax office website. That is an important form that you've got to lodge to the tax office. And once the tax office look at that form and all your points as to why you shouldn't be charged Medicare levy, which for every other citizen, it's 2% of your taxable income, okay? They will then send you a letter saying you're exempt from Medicare levy, okay? You're exempt from Medicare levy. And I strongly urge you not to do your tax return until you get that statement from the tax office or from Medicare or whoever sends it first. Okay. If you claim full exemption for 365 days of Medicare levy, and you still haven't got your Medicare notification or tax office notification, then just be mindful that if it came to an audit, you have to produce it. You have to produce it. So to be on the safe side, most tax returns from individuals do not need to be lodged have to be lodged before 31st October of the financial year, right? Unless you have a professional tax practitioner or agent lodging it for you. So that agent has got what they call a lodgement program, which can defer after 31st October to lodge a return if for whatever circumstance. But if you lodge your statement of Medicare entitlement statement now, you should get it definitely within a month. So you'll have it ready before you finalize your tax return or lodge your tax return. Okay. I hope I've made that point quite clear. The other thing of concern is medical expenses, because you don't get Medicare, but you still incur medication, dental expenses, and so forth. The question is asked, can you claim those things? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Okay? Not anymore. It used to be, but not anymore. We used to be able to claim for chemists, doctors, dentists, orthopedics. All those expenses are not claimable anymore. And unfortunately, from the 1st of July 2019, no more medical expenses at all can be claimed. There were some exceptions for the 19 year, but now zero. So that's bad news. That's bad news, because I know some families have got kids who've got braces and stuff like that, thousands of dollars, and unfortunately they can't get any claim. But they can, if they've got private health insurance that covers dental, then they can make some sort of compensation payment from the health fund. Okay, from the health fund. I hope I'm not I'm trying to go as slow as I can, because these topics are very, very important to take them stage by stage. The other thing I'd like to cover quickly is this issue between who is an employee and who is a contractor. Okay, who is an employee and who is a contractor? This has been an ongoing battle for a number of years. If you're an employee, you are under the direction of your employer. There's no doubt about that. You turn up at specified times and so forth. You're paid an award rate according to your industry, and you work certain times, taxes taken out, your employer pays your super, which incidentally, super has gone up from the 1st of July. Did you know that? To 10%? From 9% it's gone to 10%, and it's going to creep up to 12%. So of course, employers are bracing themselves for this additional cost, and really wondering, do we need any employees, sort of thing. But in some industries, you just got to have employees, like the hospitality industry, for example, in particular. So just bear in mind, your employer has to pay super from the 1st of July this year. It's going up to 10%. Was 9%, now it's going up to 10%. And students, I beseech you to just not take the employer's word for granted that he's paying super. He's paying super, right? Check it yourself, because you will have access to the super fund that the employer is paying your super, supposed to pay the super into. You have a duty to check that every so often, that, yeah, your super balance is building up, your employer is paying in it, and it's very, very clear on the statement you get, employer contribution. So many students have not done that checking and found that some unscrupulous employers had not been paying their super. And to try and get it back, some of those employers could have gone out of business. Okay, you're entitled to get back your super if you leave the country permanently. But if you've got no chance of getting anything back, you've actually lost out. So I beseech you to not take the employer's word for granted that they're paying super. Check it yourself. Check it yourself. You will have access to the super fund. You can nominate your own super fund, whichever one you want to, or you can go with your employer's super fund. Whatever it is, the employer is entitled to let you know exactly what your membership number is and what the super fund is. So you can do your own checking. Don't forget, it's your fault if you don't do the checking. There have been many, many cases where the tax office has come down really, really hard on directors and made them pay the penalty, and in some cases the super or withholding tax paid themselves, and that's bankrupt a lot of them. So pretty serious. So my advice is you're entitled to your super. Make sure that it's being paid into your super account on a regular basis, whether it's weekly, fortnightly, or whatever. Now, talking about employee and ABNs, there's a lot of myths out there. You know, people go into somewhere to work and they say, "Oh, I've got an ABN." So the employers, the person, the employing them say, "Oh, good, okay, that's good. I don't have to take out pay super. I don't have to do this. I don't have to take out the wages. I just, you know." But in actual fact, it's the employer's responsibility to check with the tax office tool, employer-employee tool, whether or not this person is actually an employer and a contractor, or should he be classified as an employee. It's not the employee's responsibility. It's the employee's responsibility to check on the tool, on the ATO website tool, whether or not under the conditions and whatever he's working, this person, this worker, they call it, because worker is the big category, and then you got employee, and then you got contractor. So they're both called workers under the law, but one is actually a worker employee and one is a worker contractor. So if the employee says, "Oh, mate, I've got an ABN, blah blah blah. I'm only working for you, and I'll do all my tax." And the employer says, "Oh, great, okay," and doesn't do any checking. If it comes to the crunch and the tax office determine that this person is actually an employee, they can ask that employer to backdate the super that he should have been paying. Backdate the super that he should have been paying, because this person is deemed to be an employee from the type of character work that he's doing. So it's very, very important. There have been cases and cases and cases where people have, and a recent case, of course, is a company called Deliveroo. I'm sure you've heard of Deliveroo, where it's still on appeal. The Fair Work Ombudsman or Commission deemed this particular worker to be an employee. So that means he was entitled to certain privileges of an employee, you know, sick leave or long sick or, you know, whatever. But Deliveroo are arguing that no, he's a contractor. So this has been going back and forth, and it's still not resolved, in my view, what it is. So, but it's if Deliveroo did their due diligence by using that tool. By using that tool, it may be that the answer would have come up to them at the beginning that he was an employee. Maybe. I don't know. Do we have any questions at this point in time, Tatiana?
Foster, you are already addressing many of the questions the students have asked. So it's all good. I just want you to confirm again the time students should be doing their tax return. Like they are...
Everybody has got to the 31st of October of that financial year. So in Australian tax financial year is from 1 July to 30 June. Okay, that's number one. So once 30 June is over, they've got to the 31st of October this year to lodge their tax return, unless they do it through a tax practitioner or an agent. Okay.
Yeah,
And
that's a question I have also. So from the information students can get on the website, the tax return website, are they able to do all this themselves, or you suggest that they find someone to help them with that, like a professional to help them do their tax return?
okay, my view is this. My view is this, and it's been my view all along. Where you're new to Australia, a recent arrival in Australia, it's a big task to get your head around the tax laws to lodge your first tax return. Whether it's just a salary and wage or whatever, it'll pay the student to go and see a professional, pay the professional fees, get a very good idea as to the tax configuration, the advice, and that'll be a great platform for that student for future years to do it on their own. I've seen a lot of errors. Unfortunately, the tax office, not always, but they're getting a lot of errors coming through from people not really understanding, not just students, but people that don't use a tax profession to be able to say what they can claim and what they can't claim. You know, some of the claims are absolutely out of this world claims, which they think that they can get away with, you know. For example, I'll give you a good example. This particular taxpayer, you know, he works in an office, doesn't have to do anything apart from any expenditure, apart from maybe dry cleaning or cleaning his uniform or whatever. And he's claiming, you know, $200 worth of pens and stationery. Now, these are the sort of things that really irritate the tax office, because there's no way in the world that he can incur that. Now, if he went and saw a professional at the outset, the professional would have advised him, hello, mate, you can't do this, and why you can't do it. Okay. So by seeing a professional at the outset, particularly if you're first time in Australia working, it's a complex thing to get your head around. See a professional and get some guidance, proper guidance, and from then on, you know the boundaries, what you can work within, and do it yourself after that.
That's great advice, Foster. And I'm sure students will benefit a lot from your experience. I don't know if you have any other point you want to comment on.
Well, I guess without repeating myself too much, I want students to be comfortable that the tax office here is not to grab them by the scruff of their neck or by the throat, you know, and hold them in. If you make a mistake, a genuine mistake in a claim, right? The tax office are very reasonable to whatever argument you got to put up. If you made a mistake, you made a mistake, admit the mistake and get on with it, right? Don't try and challenge it with the tax office, because I can bet you they know more than you do.
Yeah.
Unless, you know, if it's a simple mistake you've made, they're not going to penalize you. Okay, guys? They are not going to come down on a ton of bricks on you and saying, oh, you are trying to rip off the community and blah, 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 you know. If it's an honest, genuine mistake, they are very reasonable to say, okay, it's been a mistake, you know, we'll just take away that deduction and life goes on, right? But if you're the type of person that continually irritates them by some ridiculous claims, you're going to ask for it. You're going to ask for it. They're going to be not only disallowing the claim, but they're going to penalize you. They're going to penalize you for as a culpable factor, they call it, a culpable factor for trying to be too smart, you know, trying to be too smart. And everybody has to pay their fair amount of tax, whether it's Australia, America, England, Europe, or whatever, you know, Argentina, Brazil. They've all got to pay their fair tax. As I said earlier, there is nothing wrong with minimizing your tax within the tax laws that are permitted. But there is an illegal matter where you try and, one, not disclose income that you should be disclosing. And number two, claiming expenses that you should not be claiming or that you cannot substantiate. That to me are the two bottom lines of tax avoidance, which will irritate the tax office no end. And fair enough too. I've been a tax auditor myself for many years. And I sort of feel that the tax office are really very, very fair in Australia, okay? Contrary to what some people believe, you know. In general, the officers in the tax office work really, really hard, particularly during this COVID-19 time. They're under a lot of stress, but they've coped exceptionally well, in my opinion. Working from home, you know, it's been a challenge. And in my view, I think they've come up really, really well under the circumstances. So be fair. If you have any doubts about claiming your expenses or whatever, see a tax professional to kick off with. Huh? Or if you've got a complicated situation in any shape or form, or if you're unsure or something, see a tax professional, pay for some good advice. You know. It's like anything else, you know, if you have to do an operation, you want to go to a qualified surgeon, right? That's not rocket science. You wouldn't want to go to a backyard surgeon and get a serious operation done, even a simple operation, you know. So all I can say is good luck to all the students. I think hopefully I've been able to open a few windows for you to consider. If you haven't considered it, look at those quick codes that I've given you. Yeah. Have a look at it. There's also a super hotline to the tax office, okay? And I think everybody should take this number down. It's the super info line 131020. That's the super helpline or info line. Anybody can ring up that number, whether you're a tax professional or whether you're a student or someone in the community. And you can say to them, look, I've been looking at my statement and it doesn't seem to me that my employer has been paying my super. Can you check on it? Can you please check on it? Because sometimes students are a little bit, not only students, but generally people are a little bit scared to confront their employer, yeah, for fear of losing their job. Okay.
Exactly.
For fear of losing their job. But this way, the tax office can do what they call a random audit without specifying the employee, a random questionnaire, and to track this down to see whether or not super has been paid properly. So you need to protect yourself that way. I cannot stress that more. So those numbers are kind of important. If you've got an issue to call the tax office, I'll just get another number for you. This is a personal tax number for the public. 132861. Okay, 132861. And if you've got an ABN or you consider yourself to be a business person, yeah, the number to ring is 132866. So
Awesome.
those two numbers are really, really important, and they are heaps helpful. One day you might be talking to Tasmania, next day you might be talking to WA, next day you might be talking to, some godforsaken place in Sydney. But each one of them have got their, I guess, their discipline codes on how to answer questions from clients. And most of them now have to wear a mask when they talk to you. So they preempt the conversation, saying that if you cannot hear me properly, let me know, and I'll take that mask off.
Awesome.
So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call those numbers.
Yeah, it's better to do that before, right, Foster, than having bad news afterwards, after a few years maybe, or some problems that they could have, addressed before.
You know what they say? Preparation makes perfect performance.
Yeah.
The 3 P's in life, Preparation prepares you for avoids poor performance. So you're quite right. Call them. Doesn't matter how many times you call them. They will answer your questions. If they cannot answer the questions, they'll say, "This is beyond my skill set," and we'll pass you on to another section.
Yes.
But 99% of the time, somebody will answer your question.
Perfect. Foster, thank you so much for sharing with us all these, tax concepts. And we will be sharing with the students all the codes you gave, these numbers and the helpline as well, to help them look for information if they need. All right.
All right, no, that's fine. I'm glad I'm able to share some of my experiences, and but the main thing the students have got to understand is that the tax office is not a big bear to come to get you. Okay.
All right.
They're quite a friendly puppy, actually.
That's good to know. Thank you, Foster. Have a lovely day, and thank you everyone for watching. See ya.
Thanks, student.